Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming event, Intersecting Wills Wrapped in Kindness for Krile from Final Fantasy V. This event is the first Intersecting Wills event with the new SHINRYU difficulty. Other than Krile, the synergy unit for the event is Auron, Strago and Kain. The featured units will be getting their force enhancement boards unlocked. Krile FR will be making her debut. Both she and Auron will be getting their reworks and C90 awakenings. We will be fighting two Twintania. They have 50 million HP each. The turn requirement is 50. The HP requirements is 15,000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. As we are no longer have Twintania plus fights, the boss guide will be focused primarily on SHINRYU fights. In SHINRYU, you need to understand the effects gained by the boss as the force gauge build up, its force ability and its force time effect. As your party has low force levels at the start of the era, it is highly certain that the boss force gauge will build up faster than yours. To have a better understanding on the basics of the force gauge mechanics and SHINRYU fights, I have done a video explaining the mechanics. I have included the link to the video under the comments and video description for your quick reference. For this fight, the boss force gauge is broken into 5 thresholds. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 40%, the boss gains a post-turn brave regen of 110% of its initial brave. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 60%, the boss gains a post-turn brave regen of 110% of its initial brave and an additional 30% brave damage resist against non-thunder elemental attacks. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 80%, the boss gains a post-turn brave regen of 110% of its initial brave and an additional 50% brave damage resist against non-thunder elemental attacks. The boss force gauge will build up faster as its HP is lowered. You can refer to the table on the screen for the percentages. At the 100% threshold, the boss will use its force ability, Gigaflare++ and activates its force time for 3 turns. The boss force ability, Gigaflare++, is a guaranteed hit, reset break status, AoE brave plus HP attack. It will increase by its own brave by 150% of its initial brave after the attack. Upon using the force ability, the boss will enter into its force time where the gauge will start to emit a red hue with counter of 3 on its gauge. When the force time is activated, the boss brave cannot drop below 20% of its max brave. To freeze the enemy's force time, you need to use a Thunder Elemental Force ability, which is Krile's FR ability at the moment. To make your fight easier, you can bring a Thunder Enchanter like Krile, Garnet, Ash, Regen, or Desh so you can avoid having the brave damage penalties as the boss force gauge builds up. Do note that having Thunder Enchant isn't a necessity as long as you have good party-wide damage mitigation. Gravity, Ignore Defense, and Instant Break are great options to handle the boss brave gains for this fight. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. To speed up the fight, using HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Seymour, Fran, Ignis, Lily-Set, Maria, and Dark Knight Cecil are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, Aura-type HP damage up calls like Kumari, Alisai, Priyash, Leo and Locke are also viable. Most recently C90 units have Aura-type HP damage up bonuses. You can use Dissidia DB Call Finder to find out more. The fight features a lot of HP attacks. Damage mitigation calls like Warrior of Light, Regen, Redia, and Reno are useful here. You can also bring Thunder Enchant calls like Garnet, Krile, and Ash so you won't suffer too many brave damage penalties as the boss force gauge builds up. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. For any endgame fights like Twintania and SHINRYU, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. You can consider bringing Selphie, Lena, Ishtala, Yuna, Garnet, Purim, Rem, and Ramza. Both Selphie and Lena are great for this fight for their debuff evasion utility. Selphie can make your party hit hard with her guaranteed launch debuff, while Lena can ensure your party is always safe with her powerful HP regen buffs. Bulk of the boss turns feature an AoE HP attacks. The fight feature one of the game's best damage mitigators in the form of Auron. I would highly recommend you to pull for him if you don't have him. Other than Auron, examples of damage mitigators to use for the fight are Leela, Beatrix, Snow, Zac, Edge, Warrior of Light, Celis, and Glove. As the boss force gauge has properties that will limit your brave damage capabilities if they are dealing non-thunder elemental attacks. Thus, bringing a thunder enchanter like Krile, Ash, Garnet, and Regen will help a lot for the fight. Alternatively, you can also bring thunder elemental units like Beatrix, Lightning, Reno, Vincent, and Mog for the fight. When Krile's force ability is activated, you can abuse her damage bonus by dealing any form of thunder elemental attacks. Off-turn damage like counters and traps also benefits a lot from damage bonus during her force time. She can massive uptick the force damage bonus by using her batteried abilities, S1, EX and LD. Like Pernello, Krile is another great force gauge charger that is worth the full force enhancement upgrades if you get her FR. In this era, units with their force enhancement will offer additional advantage for the fight, as they will gain bonuses from force time or when the force gauge is at least 80%. They will also gain bonuses to help the charging of your own force gauge, which means you can gain access to your force time earlier. If you still haven't pulled for any FR, you can gain access to the powerful force gauge by bringing a Kain FR or Krile FR friend. Kain FR with BT friends is a premium luxury to have in early SHINRYU and will continue to be one of the best friend support units for a while. You can build your force gauge to the max, bringing in your Kain FR friend to activate the force gauge. Get into your own burst phase and abuse his powerful follow-up. Fulfilling his force conditions of dealing launches or dealing ranged damage will enhance the damage bonuses during his force time. Krile's FR is also great for this fight, as she can offers a devastating nuke strategy alternative with her spamming her S1 with Kain follow-up attacks during her force time. To build up your force gauge, consider bring a force gauge charger. Pernello and Krile offers good option for the fight. If you have their force level max, they can supercharge the force gauge fast and give you big damage bonuses boost. Instant turn ability or high turn rate ability that does not do HP damage is a premium utility for force gauge charging. Pernello can provide powerful HP regens and provide big burst healing with her EX. She can cleanse debuffs with her LD. You can bring other units with force enhancements for the fight. Kain, Strago, and Mog offers nice damage. Strago can quickly shave off the boss brave gains with his instant break or gravity shaving utility. Mog deals thunder elemental damage and have debuff cleansing utility with his follow-up. As mentioned earlier, the fight features a lot of AoE HP damage attacks. A damage mitigator like Warrior of Light and Auron will help a lot for the fight. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. Like Twintania, SHINRYU fights also features aura boosts for the boss when their HP are depleted to a certain threshold. The stats boosts are triggered at the start of the fight and 79%. The enemy's force gauge will charge faster as their HP depletes. As the enemy's force gauge reaches 40% and above, the boss will gain post-turns brave regen. It will gain additional brave damage resistance when its force gauge reaches 60% and above. When it activates its force time, the boss will become immune to breaks as it gains access to a max brave floor of 20%. The boss has a standard damage rotation cycle, which I go through in detail in the upcoming slides. Once its recast gauge is maxed, the boss will gain a red aura and framed its turn, where it becomes immune to delay from break, turn delay, and turn deletion. The effect will be dispelled when the boss uses its Recast ability. Compared to the previous fight, this fight is considerably easier. Bring Thunder enchanters will make your fight easier. Damage mitigators like Warrior of Light will allows you to focus on fight the boss. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Similar to any Twintania fights, for SHINRYU fights, the boss will also gain stats boosts and brave gain reduction auras when you deplete the boss's HP to a certain threshold. However, SHINRYU bosses will also gain HP damage reduction auras as well. The threshold's trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 79% HP threshold. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 200%. It will raise its brave damage and brave gain reduction auras to 80%. It will also reduce your HP damage dealt by 50%. At 79% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense stats to 300% and raises the HP damage dealt reduction auras to 80%. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the brave gain reductions, you can bring a brave gain up support like Agrias, Ram, or Quistis. With the recent units released, you shouldn't have any problem in handling the brave gain or damage reduction auras. For HP damage reduction auras, HP damage up calls will only partly offset against the reductions. However, you can easily overwrite them with your party force time. As we progress through the era, we will gain access to units with FR that allows you to build up your force time HP damage bonuses up to 999%. Learning on how to take full advantage of the damage window in SHINRYU fight holds the key on how to make SHINRYU fights easier. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. Let's recap on the boss Recast ability. The boss takes 4 to 5 turns to fully charge its Recast gauge. Once the boss Recast gauge is maxed, it will trigger a red aura and framed its turn. While the red aura is active, the boss will become immune to delay from breaks, turn delay, and turn deletion. In order for the boss to dispel the red aura, you will need it to use its Recast ability, Giga Flare. Giga Flare is a brave gain, AoE brave plus HP attack. Prepare your damage mitigation or party evasion to withstand this incoming attack. The boss has a standard damage rotation cycle. It will start off with Atomic Ray where IT is an AoE brave plus HP attack. On their following turn, they will use Mind Blast, a single target brave attack that inflicts paralysis on the target. To handle this, make sure you have evasion, or debuff cleanser. You can also avoid this by deploying 6 framed buffs. Using a lock call on Kain and have him hide in the air is a great idea to handle this as well. Next, they will use Tidal Wave, which is another AoE brave plus HP attack. If the Recast gauge is full, the boss will skip the next rotation and do the power up and uses the Recast ability. It will revert back to the standard rotation cycle after it used the Recast ability. The rotation looks harmless on surface, but pairing with the boss post-turn brave regen buff, it can be pretty dangerous if you are unprepared. Do standby damage mitigation to avoid any unnecessary KO from the boss HP attacks. I have come to the last slide of the guide. As this is the second SHINRYU fight, there is a high possibility that you might not access to the powerful force time mechanics if you didn't get Kain's or Krile FR. So, I will be covering on how handle them if that happens. Let's start off with the easier scenario. In other words, you have gotten a FR weapon. You can just simply build up your force gauge. Every action taken will build up the gauge. The pace of the gauge build up will depends a lot on your party force level. The higher the force level, the faster the gauge will build. It is highly unlikely that the charging of your force gauge will be faster than the boss force gauge, so you will be bound to seeing the boss force mechanics. The strategy with FR is quite simple: build up your gauge. Once it is fully charged, use Kain's or Krile's force ability to activate your party force time. Abuse force time mechanics by deploying units that help to fulfill force time conditions. 1. If Pernello is at a high force level, you can abuse it with Pernello spamming her haste rumba while Kain firing lancets at the bosses. 2. If you are using Kain FR, you can gain big bonuses, if you score a full party launch. Units that can launch and delay will help a lot. One of the key conditions for Kain FR is dealing ranged damage. Off-turn damage will also help to boost the damage bonus. Pairing units that deal off-turn like Sasnii, Freya, or Noctis will help to amplify the build-up of HP damage bonuses. Pair them with a turn hogger like Titus and Terra, or you can use your FR charger like Krile and Pernello to spam their non-attack instant turn to abuse the damage bonus. Now let's talk about the harder option. In other words, doing the fight without any FR. As the saying goes, if you don't have one, borrow one from your friend. If you have gotten Kain or Krile fully geared, do a favor for the community by setting up them as your friend's support. The boss damage bonuses will be weakened if you deal Thunder Elemental attack. Other than Krile, you can bring other Thunder enchant options like Krile, Desh, Ash, Garnet, or Regen. It is possible to do it without any Thunder Elemental units for the fight, but it will be harder for sure. AoE damage mitigation is important here, as the 3 out of 4 bosses moveset will result at using a HP attack. The boss will gain post-turn Brave Regen, which will make its attack deadlier if you get broken by their attacks. Make use of Brave control utility debuffs like Poison or Sap debuff to minimize their Brave gains. As the boss post-turn Brave Regen and Brave gain skills off their initial Brave debuff will be useful here as well. Instant Break and Gravity Brave shaving utility will help a lot for the fight as well. This fight is much easier than the previous fight. There are completion in JP that Fetor no BT no FR runs. Do note that using Kain FR won't freeze the boss force time, as you need to use a Thunder Elemental Force ability to freeze it. Moving forward from this boss guide onwards, I will do a quick overview on the featured units FR. Krile can also do same thing with her FR by having her spamming Ray of Hope with Kain firing lancets in the background. Krile's force time allows her to gain an additional 20% damage boost when she battery her party while her force time is activated. As her Ray of Hope is non-HP damage skill and it is instant turn, she will boost the force gauge by a whopping 70% if you have her force enhancement boards fully maxed. Her force time also offers 5% damage bonus whenever you deal Thunder Elemental attacks to the boss. Units that deal Thunder, Trap, and Counter offer great compatibility with her FR. With this, I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight tomorrow. Bye.